I'm going to say a few words. It's kind of an alternative liberation speech, I guess, after the events of yesterday. So I'd settle down because it might take a few minutes, but I'm going to go ahead anyway because it needs to be said today, tomorrow, and every day. So, ladies and gentlemen, we gather here in solemn vigil the day after the 80th anniversary of Jersey's liberation, a day when Nazi oppression on this island finally ended. Yet today, our celebration is tempered by grief and urgency as we stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine. Nelson Mandela once reminded us, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Those words ring out now across decades and continents. Just as Jersey's forebears yearned for deliverance in 1945, millions of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank still yearn for liberation from a harsh occupation. Today we draw on the lessons of our own history, not to diminish its suffering, but to recognize its echo in the present. For 5 long years, Jersey's people lived under the yoke of Nazi rule. We recall and remember the curfews, the hunger, the fear of arrest or deportation for any act of defiance. We remember that some of our own were sent to brutal camps simply for listening to the BBC or aiding a forced worker. Yet, as harrowing as those years were, most islanders survived. The German occupiers did not indiscriminately carpet bomb St. Helier or annihilate entire families in punishment. In contrast, Palestinians have faced decades of dispossession and military occupation, a multi-generational ordeal that far eclipses the 5 years occupation in scale and severity. Consider this, during the occupation of Jersey, a few dozen islanders lost their lives at Nazis' hands. There was hardship and occasional brutality, but outright massacres on Jersey soil did not occur. In Palestine, however, violence is a relentless daily reality. In the past year and a half, Israel's war on Gaza has killed tens of thousands. Over 48,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since October 7, and thousands more lie unrecovered beneath the rubble. To grasp the enormity of that toll is hundreds of times the entire population of Jersey lost in World War II.
Just ignore him.
Gaza's children, innocent and trapped, have been slaughtered on a scale that led one humanitarian group to call the occupied Palestinian territory the deadliest place in the world for children. In the West Bank too, the violence has been unyielding. Since October 2023, Israeli soldiers have killed around 870 Palestinian residents. We in Jersey can recall the anger and powerlessness of living under occupation, but imagine an occupation that never ends, an occupation where advanced weaponry pulverizes your towns, where your children grow up if they survive, amid rubble and constant fear. Jersey's occupation thankfully ended in 1945. Palestinians has not ended, not in 67, not in 93, and not today in 2025. During our occupation, rations dwindled and hunger set in. Yet even the Nazis eventually allowed humanitarian relief rather than watch the population starve. In Gaza, by contrast, food, water, medicine, and fuel have been deliberately obstructed as a tactic of war. This is not language or In October 2023, Israel's defense minister announced a complete siege of Gaza, vowing no electricity, no food, no water, everything is closed, while calling Palestinians human animals. This is not language or conduct befitting a civilized state. It is a rhetoric of dehumanization and of extermination. It is unthinkable that even in Jersey's darkest days, an occupying power would openly declare an intent to starve our entire population as a method of warfare. Yet that is precisely what is happening in Gaza. As Jersey starved in late 1944, an ember of hope appeared on the horizon, the Red Cross ship SS Vega. Through painstaking negotiation, even Nazi Germany relented enough to let this neutral relief ship through the blockade. The Vega arrived in late December 1944, carrying 460 food parcels. Can we imagine the joy and relief of those days? Survivors recalled the sheer elation of receiving Red Cross parcels. God, we were happy, said one Jersey man, remembering treats like cheese, condensed milk, and chocolate in those life-saving boxes. Even the occupying German garrison, themselves by that point hungry, had to stand by and watch as islanders finally received nourishment and hope. That is what humanity looked like. Even amidst war, a line was drawn that civilians should not be allowed simply to perish. The Red Cross was permitted to do its work and lives were saved. Now contrast this with Gaza today. There, a blockade has sealed 2.3 million people for years, and Israel has forbidden even the most humanitarian aid from entering. Far from permitting relief ships, the Israeli state has gone so far as to attack and bomb those who dare to send help. And last week, an unarmed vessel called Conscience, laden with humanitarian aid and activists, tried to reach Gaza by sea. In international waters off Malta, armed drones bombed the ship, igniting a fire and blowing a hole in its hull. Think about that. Bombing a relief ship in international waters. If Nazis had sunk the SS Vega before it reached Jersey, we would have called it a war crime and an atrocity. Yet today, such brutality registers not a response from world leaders. Where is the outrage and where is the action? When asked about the desperate citizens of Gaza, we hear things like humanitarian aid to Gaza, not a switch will be flicked on, not a valve opened. They openly talk of scorched earth. One Israeli officer boasted that when their campaign is over, whoever returns to Gaza will find no houses, no agriculture, no nothing. They have no future. These statements are real, they are documented, and they betray an intent to destroy a people's very means of life. My friends, how can we, as beneficiaries of a life-saving humanitarian effort 80 years ago, not feel rage and sorrow at the spectacle of an occupying power today preventing food and medicine from reaching civilians and even targeting those who try and help? Under Nazi occupation, Jersey saw cruelty, but also remarkable compassion. Ordinary people here, despite risking their own lives, held on to their humanity and helped those even worse off than themselves. In 1943, over 2,000 foreign forced laborers, French, Polish, Russian and Spanish, and others were shipped to Jersey and other Channel Islands to build fortifications. These men were treated as slave workers by the Nazis, given starvation diets and worked to exhaustion. They shared food in secret, offered help, a shelter to escapees, and showed kindness where possible. The Jersey people's kindness did not go unnoticed. On Charing Cross in St Helier today, engraved in the pavement, you will find the words of John Dalmau, a Spanish Republican forced labourer who was brought here by the Nazis. He said, "I shall never forget the kindness shown to me by the people of Jersey." These words, immortalised in stone, testify that even in an atmosphere of fear and oppression, Jersey's human decency shone through. There are other inscriptions too, recalling how islanders instinctively decided to help escaped prisoners. One Jersey woman, Stella Perkins, recalled, "There was no discussion about whether to help the escaped labourers or not. They just couldn't help themselves. In other words, helping those in need was automatic, a simple matter of right and wrong." And then there's the story of Louisa Gould, an ordinary Jersey shopkeeper and mother. Louisa had an escaped young Soviet prisoner in her home for nearly 2 years. When her friends asked why she would endanger herself and her family, she simply answered, "I have to do something for another woman's son." Tragically, Louisa was betrayed. She was arrested by the Gestapo and deported to Ravensbrück concentration camp, where she was murdered in 1945. Louisa Gould paid with her life, one of the martyrs of compassion in Jersey's war story. We honour her and others like her, islanders who kept their humanity when it was most difficult. Today, as we invoke these memories, we must ask, where is that humanity today? Where is the global outcry or the willingness of ordinary people to risk something for the innocents of Gaza and the oppressed of the West Bank? 78 years after Louisa Gould gave her life, Palestinian mothers are making equally desperate choices. Smuggling bread to a neighbour's family under curfew, or sheltering orphan children from shelling. Their compassion is abundant, but ours often feels absent. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who knew about courage and compassion under oppression, once warned, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." The people of Jersey were not neutral bystanders in 43 when starving labourers needed help. They acted. We have inherited that legacy of solidarity. So what will we do now? Will we never forget the kindness that can save lives? Or will future generations mark this year with shame, asking why the world abandoned Gaza? May the 9th, 1945, liberation. It meant the end of a racist tyranny, a victory over fascism, and a promise of a return to dignity for the oppressed. Those who survived that war believed never again should such hatred and oppression be allowed to terrorize innocent people. But as we look around the world today, we see the ugly resurgence of fascist ideologies that our grandparents bled to defeat. In many places, far-right movements are on the rise. Disturbingly, one of such ideology is Zionism in its current military form. This is not to equate Zionism with the Jewish faith or Jewish identity, absolutely not. It is to call out the political ideology that has taken hold in Israel's corridors of power. It ethnically segregates, dispossesses, and brutalizes an entire population. When we strip away the layers of historical complexity, we must confront a stark reality. The Israeli state meets many of the criteria of a fascist regime. Even some of Israel's highest profile leaders have sounded the alarm about this. Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, warned already in 2016 that Israel was showing the seeds of fascism in its political developments. And that was before. Now, amid the fever of conflict, outright genocidal statements have entered the mainstream. Just days ago, a member of the Israeli parliament stood and called for the use of the nuclear bomb in Gaza. The International Court of Justice felt compelled to issue an order to prevent genocide in Gaza. South African veterans of the anti-apartheid struggle say what the Palestinians endure is far more brutal than anything we saw in South Africa. Indeed, it meets the legal definition of apartheid, which is a crime against humanity. When a state practices such oppression and its leaders increasingly incite hatred and violence, we are justified in calling what it is: fascism. In 1948, a group of Jewish intellectuals, including Albert Einstein and Hannah Arendt, wrote a public letter warning that some leading Zionist militias exhibited the same ultra-nationalist and authoritarian patterns as European fascists. They cautioned against supporting a political party closely akin in its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. As people who cherish what Liberation Day stands for, we have a duty to speak plainly. Zionism, as implemented by Israeli state today, is a racist, settler colonial ideology.
Hear, hear.
This does not mean that the horrors of the Holocaust are forgotten, or that history's role has been simply reversed. It means that a government claiming the legitimacy of the oppressed has itself become an oppressor. The resurgence of fascistic ideology in any form, anywhere, must be resisted, whether it wears a swastika, wraps itself in a national flag, or drapes it in scripture. So what shall we do? It's not enough to commiserate or draw parallels. History demands that we take a stand. We stand here today not only to remember Jersey's liberation, but to insist upon Gaza's liberation, and indeed the liberation of all people living under oppression. Mandela's call echoes in the air. Our freedom is incomplete while Palestinians are not free. We who have known occupation, who honor those who helped in our darkest hour, have a special responsibility. When we say we remember, it must not only be the remembrance of our own suffering, but also an obligation to act so that others may be free from suffering today and in the future. So I conclude with a call to action. Let this vigil not end when the candles burn out and when the scaffolding comes down on Liberation Day. Let it mark the beginning of a renewed commitment in all of us and in Jersey and everywhere to support the Palestinian struggle for freedom. What does this mean? It means raising our voices in our parliament, in our media, in our schools and our churches to demand an end to the Gaza blockade and occupation. It means pressurizing those in power, urging our lawmakers to condemn the war crimes being committed, to impose real consequences for illegal settlements and indiscriminate bombings, and to insist on humanitarian access immediately. It means supporting charities providing relief for Palestinian civilians, just as the world once sent Red Cross parcels to this very island. It means speaking truth to power even when it's uncomfortable. even when one risks being slandered, misunderstood. Because moral outrage is the least we can owe the victims in Gaza's rubble and in West Bank's tear gas streets. Above all, it means refusing to be neutral. We must reject the convenient excuse that this is too complicated or nothing to do with us. We know where such shrugging of responsibility leads. We saw it in the 1930s when good people did nothing for too long. Write to your representatives and keep writing. I wrote to the Chief Minister a month ago, not heard a bloody thing back. That says a lot. Challenge misinformation when you see it. If some pundit or neighbour repeats dehumanising tropes about Palestinians, remind them that these are human beings, parents, children, humans as real and worthy of life as we are. In 1945, the people of Jersey rejoiced as liberators arrived, and the Union Jack was raised again. Today, the Palestinian flag is a symbol of an ongoing fight for liberation. Flying that flag is not an act of provocation. It is an act of solidarity with the very ideals which our forebears fought for in World War II. It is saying that what we remember is we remember what fascism is and we will oppose it no matter what guise it takes. It is saying that we remember what liberation means. Not conquest or revenge, but the restoration of dignity and rights. And it is saying that we refuse to let never again become an empty slogan. To the people of Palestine, we send this message: you are not alone. From this little island that knows the price of freedom, we stand with you. Your liberation is our liberation. We will not be free so long as you are oppressed. We will remember your suffering as it were our own, and we will strive in whatever ways we can to hasten the day you too can celebrate your Liberation Day. Thank you, and in the spirit of those who have fought tyranny before, let us go forth from here and act for a more just, compassionate world. For Jersey, for Palestine, for everyone. No more complicity, no more silence. Free Gaza, free Palestine.
Yay. Thank you.